Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Blue Grit Radio. Today, I'm joined by Dre Baldwin, ex-professional basketball player, current, maybe I should let you rattle off the things, but, you're a speaker, you're a business coach, you're a content creator. Yeah, but without further ado, welcome on the show. Thanks for coming on, man.
Well, thank you for having me on, Eric. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this audience is predominantly first responders, ex-military, but, there is a desire to engage those of the public that just want to be better performing individuals, right? And better performing for their teams and the community. And so I love what you're talking about as far as working on your game, right? That's your tag. That's what you're putting out. You're trying to help everyone get better. And so I think that there's so many direct correlations to our community, how we need to step it up and essentially, as you put it, adapt to professional rather than the amateur mindset and lifestyle.
That's right, man. That's always been once I was able to articulate it and once I really got clear on it, Eric, that's really been the thing I've been focused on is what is that thing that separates the pros from the amateurs? Coming from the sports world, a lot of amateur players want to know what is it that the pros have that the amateurs don't. And yes, there's a certain level of talent that goes into it, of course, but a lot of it is choice. A lot of it is decision because there are a lot of people who have the skill to be a pro, but they don't become one. So it's not a skill difference with them. It's a mindset difference.
Yeah, I love that. I love learning more specifically from sports psychology. And for myself, I didn't grow up around sports. I'm super uncoordinated when it comes to like hand-eye coordination. So all my friends and those close to me listening to this are probably laughing, chuckling, nodding their head. But yeah, for you, where did you notice the shift and when did you pick up those patterns to analyze and basically distill that down to what you're talking about?
Man, well, I wish it was one light bulb moment, Eric, but it wasn't like that. It kind of happened over time. So where it started was just playing basketball myself, and I started to build an audience of ball players online, and they started asking questions about the mental side of the game because it was obvious that I could play, but they had never heard of me before. It's not like I was on TV every day. So they were just trying to figure out who I was, where I came from. So when I told them a little bit about my background, I didn't start playing until kind of later in like my mid-teens and only played 1 year of high school, walked on to play Division III college.
Yeah, that's so crazy, man.
Right. And then had the hustle into playing pro. But then they saw that like this guy's pretty good and his background sound like a lot of kids who end up quitting. So that's when I started talking about mindset. And then as I started talking about mindset more, it kind of flowed and became its own thing because the more I talked about it, the more the concepts just started to evolve in my mind. And it's an interesting thing when you create as much content as I create, the more you talk, the more you start to come up with your own stuff because you had to keep coming up with stuff and you keep coming up with answers and you keep you keep playing around with these questions and these challenges that people have from so many different angles because you're trying to find a different way to get the same point across that you start coming up with stuff. The creativity actually starts to feed on itself. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because you're out there in front of the audience so often. Sometimes you just come up with things and I'm like, damn. I don't even know where that came from, but that sounds good. I got to write that one down. I got to use that one again. Yeah. So that's how it happened. So over about a 5 to 7 year period, that's when I started to formulate all of this stuff. And now I've kind of codified it to where I can talk about it. I can just kind of pick something off the shelf like a library.
I love that. And that makes so much sense with me. When I came out of essentially focused on community relations, and then I pivoted to a unit focused on hiring and talking to young men and women trying to get into this job that a lot of people walked out of, having those interactions frequently and talking about what the community needed, what we need to be about, and how to challenge, some of the old notions and uplift this culture in a positive way. It all came to fruition because I was constantly thinking about it. So that's what reminds me of what you just put out, which is, when you're presented with a problem and people are coming to you looking for feedback, all you're going to do is keep hacking at it, right? And you're going to keep putting different angles on it and marinating on it and then basically putting out what you put out. I am curious, you talk about, this very dynamic and specific mindset that brought you to a level of success that a lot of people in your similar situation, as you said, did not find. For you, were there mentors that stuck out to you or experiences for you earlier on that you feel like are foundational for the catalyst of that mindset that you now adopt and you put out and help people learn about?
Well, first piece, I had to give credit to my parents. I mean,
Mm,
they set the foundation. So I had two parents at home, and they were not athletes. They were not trying to make me into an athlete. They were just, go to school, do your chores, do your homework, graduate from high school, go to college, because my parents hadn't graduated from college at the time. And my mom eventually did. My dad wasn't really a college guy.
sure.
And that was the foundation when it comes to discipline, when it comes to just showing up consistently and doing what you've dedicated yourself to do. I had to give my parents credit for that. Again, even though it was never directed towards sports. And then when it comes to other mentors, there wasn't any individual person. There was just, I was always been a big reader because my mom's in the education space. So she had
Mm,
my sister and I reading from a very young age. So I've always been into books. And once I realized that there was a whole section in the library, not the library, but the bookstore, dedicated to human psychology, which we now call personal development. I mean,
mm,
human psychology still exists, but they used to cram all the books into the human psychology section. Now they branched it off, and they got personal development, self-growth, all of that stuff. Once I realized that there was a genre for that, and there were people who specifically wrote about that stuff, I immediately took to it because, Eric, I've always been into that stuff, but I didn't know it had a label. I didn't know it was a thing. And once I realized it was a thing, I was all in on it. And I've been in on it since. And that was over 20 years ago.
paying respects and acknowledgement of your parents. And, to me, from a very bird's eye view, just to, a couple moments talking about them, it just sounded that they were engaged, right? They really gave a damn and they were invested in you. And it wasn't like, hey, go
That's
this direction for this purpose, but just helping you develop that grind, that mindset, and that work ethic. I think the reason why I like to kind of focus in on that is a lot of people that listen in to material like this podcast, to content like your own, what they're trying to do is essentially self-develop and challenge themselves to be better, better, better. And sometimes I think it's helpful to remind yourself, like, hey, if you're showing up and you're doing the work and you have the intent and the care and the love, like, that's what you need, right? It's not about being the most perfect way, or teaching the most perfect lesson, or pushing your kids towards the most perfect activity. It's just showing up simply. And that's something I talk about a lot as far as like just parenting and just showing up for your kids. And I mean, what a difference it makes for individuals and communities.
Yeah, 100%. So, like I said, that's where I have to give credit to that as to where it started. Again, even though they weren't trying to point me in any specific direction other than just finish school. That was all their thing was.
So
Yeah.
what brought you to, the beginning of you writing and putting out books? You have numerous books now. If you can kind of talk about that for us a little bit, and
Mhm.
what that journey was like.
Well, it started with the reading. So the writing came from the reading. So I've
Mm,
always been a big reader. And then the writing just came from me developing my own voice. So, in school, fifth grade, seventh grade, you have writing classes or English class where you have to write do a book report, or write about go find a news item and you have to do a little write up about it and you got to read it out loud to the class or something like that. So when I first got my chances to do that, or was the first assignments to do it, that's when I started to realize that I had a voice that I could kind of put words together in a way that appeared to be unique. And I had a teacher, maybe an English teacher in maybe seventh grade, who complimented it and said, your way is a little bit unique. Or at least she said that in an
mm,
indirect way. And then, but mind you, I went to school, this is in the 90s. So it's not like we have blogging or anything like that. So by 2005, that's when I started my first online venture, which was a blog. So I
mm.
was blogging in '05, and this is before I got on YouTube. I mean, I started to draw an audience from basketball video on YouTube, but the first thing I did was blogging. And I've always been writing because I knew I had something that I wanted to say that was unique. I had a unique perspective and a unique way of looking at things. And I knew that even from back in middle school and high school and college, just in conversation with people, that my perspective was different than how most people thought. And on top of that, because a lot of people probably think that about themselves, but on top of that, Eric, I had the ability to explain it. I could articulate my perspective. I knew it
Mm,
was different, and I could say it out loud and put it together in a way that you would understand it. You might not agree with it, but you would understand it.
yeah.
So I knew I had that ability. So then when I saw the internet becoming what it was, because I was in college from 2000 until 2004. So this is when the internet was just starting to become, I guess, what they call Web 2.0. I was in college at this time. So this is when you first started to see websites where you could put your own stuff on there. You can make your own website and say whatever you want to say. So I knew I was going to do that. So when I saw the opportunity to start a blog, that's when I did it. So that's where the writing started. And then as I was playing basketball, I was playing overseas. So I'm from the United States, but I was traveling internationally to play ball.
Yeah.
So what I would do is, this is Facebook days. Well, Facebook still exists, but I would get on Facebook and I would write articles on my Facebook page, basically talking about my experiences traveling the world. And you know how when Facebook first launched, like from like 05 to about 2010, really all the only people looking at you on Facebook are your friends, people you already know, like people you went to school with and stuff. And this is right when Facebook opened up and you didn't have to be in school to get a Facebook account. So all the people reading my articles were just people who I went to school with, right? And they're reading them, but they liked them because I knew I had this ability. I could articulate a situation. So I could be in, Lithuania, and I could write an article about something that happened in Lithuania at practice, and someone who's never been outside of the state of Pennsylvania, for example, because I'm from Philly, they could read it and they could feel like they experienced it and they could enjoy it. And so I knew I had the ability to write and kind of articulate things. So that's where the writing kind of started to do better, because I was just writing about my experience in basketball. Then I just started writing about other things. When a mindset piece came along, that's when I started to write about more abstract topics like discipline and confidence and mental toughness. And then around, to tie up this answer here, around 2010, 2011-ish, that's when I found out that self-publishing was starting to become a thing. Because I always knew I wanted to write a book, at least one. But I understood that the way the book world worked was that you had to get some book publisher to, basically affirm you and accept you to write a book. And if you didn't get that, and then you had to do all this work to try to get one of them to like you, and you had to send your stuff to all these different people. And I'm like, I don't have time to even do all that, to even find the person, let alone I could write the book pretty easily, but just to find the person to get that done, I wasn't interested. So then when I saw self-publishing was a thing where you could just write a book and like within 24 hours, your book is available on the internet, I said, okay, that's what I'll do. And that's when I started writing even more. And that's what I've been doing ever since. I have worked with traditional publishers, but I've done a lot of self-publishing as well.
Yeah, I love that. And it's something that I've been chewing on, right? People are like, well, why don't you write about that? And, I blog, I write articles for police geared, periodicals, content, but that is something I explore, which I love, that sense of free agency, right? Like you can be your own advocate, you put out your voice and people can consume it as they need. Because I did have that impression too, right? With publishers, it's almost like, a writer in the entertainment industry writes a script and maybe a studio buys it and then they just shelf it, right? Where it's like, then your voice isn't even shared, right? No one's seeing it. So that's tough, but I'm glad you found your way, kind of organically through that.
Yeah, and it was just the fact that I don't even know where I first heard of the self-publishing. Maybe somebody said it, maybe I was just looking around for it. But once I saw there was an opportunity to put yourself out there, because that's where the web was going. So that whole period between 2005 and about 2015, that 10-year period, is when we kind of went from the original web, which was just you get on different websites and you had AOL Instant Messenger and all that, to that 10-year period was a period where now anybody could basically publish themselves and put themselves out there. So YouTube was the new TV, blogging was the new journalism, and then podcasting, which was available then, it wasn't as popular, but it was out there, was the new radio. So basically you took those three forms of media, written, video, and audio, and now anyone could do it. You didn't have to go through a gatekeeper in order to get on. So I just happened to be coming of age at that exact time. So it's perfect timing.
Yeah. You talking about like starting the websites and like the first blogs makes me think about like, remember what websites like Angel Fire and like GeoCities and all that.
Yeah.
There's gonna be some listeners that are like, what the heck is he talking about? And I wonder if they could even, Google it and find out. But I'm curious, have you thought about when you started writing the blog about your experiences overseas and is basically your circles reading it, how much of that was writing for others versus writing for yourself?
It's a great question. So I'll tell you, first of all, a quick aside there about GeoCities. So when I was in college, one of the coaches who had recruited me, I had 3 different coaches in college. So one of the coaches who had recruited me to a new school, he got fired after my sophomore year, and a new coach came in my junior year. and he kind of replaced a whole bunch of the previous incumbent players. So one of those players who was my teammate, he was a little bit of a computer geek. He's really honor student and all this stuff. So he knew how to build websites, or at least GeoCities level websites back then, before I even knew how to do it. And he and his roommate, I believe it was his roommate, one of his friends, they went and made a website basically trashing the new coach, and it was on Yahoo GeoCities. So this had the attention of the entire campus for about a month, because everybody's looking on his website where the new coach is getting trashed by some anonymous person. So because the guy, he hid himself, so nobody knew it was him that was writing the website.
Yeah.
I later found out it was him, but again, this is primitive days of websites, so nobody even knew who was doing it. So that's what made it funny, because we're seeing this coach getting trashed, but nobody knows who's doing the writing. And it turns out it was one of my teammates, but nobody knew then. I didn't know till later that he was doing it. But anyway, since you mentioned GeoCities, maybe you think of that.
Yeah, a little throwback. Yeah,
Right.
I'm curious, man. Like, so you, I'm guessing, never expected to be a pro athlete going across the world. What did young Dre want to do?
Well, I knew I was going to be known for something. I didn't know what. So the first thing I really took to was sports, but I didn't get to basketball until about 14. So I was playing baseball, football. Those are the sports I thought I might have a chance in, maybe some track and field. I dabbled a little bit in tennis, and finally came around to basketball after I never really played football. I never even got to the part of wearing the equipment. Baseball I did for a couple of years. I wasn't really that good at it. So basketball was kind of like the last shot. So I knew I was going to be known for something.
There's a dad joke there.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't even catch that, but yes. Yeah. So basketball was the last thing I took a chance at, and I just stuck with it. And I found myself just getting better as I just continued to practice. The good thing about basketball is you can practice by yourself. So unlike baseball and football, so you can get better on your own. So that was a good thing with basketball, and being where I'm from Philadelphia. So in the city where I grew up, every young man plays basketball for some period of time to see if they got a chance. So I just happen to stay over there.
I love that. What I really love is that from a young age, you can remember recognizing, not just believing, but recognizing, because I think that belief manifests, right? And you recognize that you would be great at something. To me, and I've reflected on this in my blog and I've talked about it, but I had an extreme lack of confidence growing up, right? I was a shy kid. And then even beyond that, I thought, when I really explore it, and I've been writing a little bit about it, but I believed that I would probably be, better than average. I knew that I had gifts. I knew I was smart. I knew I was a hard worker. But to say something like I would be great at something, that's vocabulary that never entered my mind, and I never took myself there. It's truly in adulthood that I've gained more confidence, and I'm working on it. And so that's something we talk about as far as mindset, as far as my community and my content. I'm curious where that came from you, and do you attribute that to your parents and your upbringing, or was that something innate?
Where what specifically came from?
Yeah, from your confidence and your sense and belief that you would achieve big things.
Yeah, I think where that comes from is, I don't know, I think it's a little bit of self-delusion at first. I mean, I think that's where it had to start.
I love it, though.
Yeah, because I didn't have any...
But you're right. Because
I ended up being right.
You made it right.
Right. So here's the thing, and I'm glad you added that, because it started with me just knowing that somebody was going to know, people were going to know me for something. And it turns out I ended up choosing basketball. And again, I didn't really have any tangible results to back up this belief, but I had the belief. So the belief was way larger than my accomplishments for many years. And the thing is, anyone can have that delusion that they're going to be successful, but that doesn't mean you're actually going to become successful.
Sure.
The difference between, because everybody in life, what I tell people is that everybody has to go through stuff. Everybody has to go through things in life, and everybody has a story. Everyone has those two things in common. We all go through stuff, and we all have a story. The difference is the people who go through the stuff and they end up successful, or they end up winning. Let's say they end up crossing the finish line. They get to tell their story. And the people who go through stuff, but they don't end up crossing the finish line, they have a story, but nobody wants to hear it, right? Because Jim Rohn once said, and Jim Rohn was Tony Robbins' mentor back in the day. He said, people who end up, he was just calling winners and failures. He said people who fail, they don't get to tell their stories because nobody wants to pay them to give a speech, right? But it's not like they don't have something valuable you can learn from, because you might want to learn from the mistakes. The point, though, is, and what I explain to people all the time, is that the only time people want to hear your story is when you've created success. So you have to create a certain level of success, and then you use that success to get people's attention and respect. And now they want to hear you, and now you get to tell your story. There's not a human on the planet who doesn't have a story. It's just
Absolutely.
that there's only certain people whose stories we want to hear, and we only want to hear somebody's story based on what have they accomplished that would make me want to listen to this individual. So accomplishments do matter, because they help you get your foot in the door. They help you get on the stage. They help you get, in front of the microphone or in front of the camera. So for me, that self-delusion only matters because I ended up creating some level of success that people look at it and they say, okay, that's interesting. This guy has done something. Let's hear what he has to say. But had I not done that, I could still be delusional, and we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Yeah, we know what those types look like, right? And so it is the 1-2 punch. It's like you got to believe,
Right.
and then you got to put in the work, right? You
That's right.
can't just say it. And I think that there some people label a generation. I would say maybe it's more just a parenting style that is, hey, you're great, you're amazing, there's the word snowflake, right? But then there isn't the follow up of, well, prove it, right? And like, yes, you are
Right.
great, you have these things, and that allows you to grind and push and elevate.
That's right. You have to you got to produce the results. And I tell my audience all the time, we're in a performance and results based business. If you want the business, you got to perform and you got to produce results. And if you don't do that, then you go out of business. That's how it works.
Yeah, it's huge. And it's, we're talking about performance. We're talking about optimization on this show for first responders. It's the make or break, right? You're prepping for the day to day, which is crucial, but you're also prepping for, the day. And we don't know if the day will show up in our careers like we see it in the news, but you can look in the news on the daily and see a really critical incident happen where you have to be sharp physically, you have to be sharp mentally, you have to be gelled in as a team to succeed in saving people, right? In those crucial moments. So I love the fact that you're so focused in on, gelling that and making sure that we are setting ourselves up to be the best we can.
That's right. I agree. When your number's called, you got to be ready.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, man.
Yeah.
You're clearly you're a great speaker, you're a great storyteller, and when you talk about, shifting that mindset, it makes me think of narrative, right? The concept of distilling down what you're doing, what chapter of life you're in, how it's reading, because you said it before, people all have a story, but is it one worth reading? And is it one that's ripe with success, or is it one that's ripe with mistakes? I'm curious how much of your coaching, when you work with entrepreneurs and businesses and organizations, when you're
Mhm.
talking about how they're framing their own place in time and where they go from that space.
So you mean as far as them telling their story to the world, or just what they're telling themselves?
Yeah, both, man. I think that they're so intertwined, right?
Yes, and it depends on what line of work they're in. So let's say somebody's trying to let's say they're doing something similar to what I'm doing. They want to be getting into coaching and speaking and selling courses and writing books and things like that. Story matters a ton. So when I work with, I would say of the people that I work with, about 40% of them are in this similar line to what I'm doing. So they are just 5 or 10 or 15 years behind me in terms of development. So they come to me to help them out, and I can help them. So they're writing books. They want to be a coach. They want to do seminars. They want to consult. They want to do speaking gigs, things like that. And one of the biggest mistakes by omission that these people are making, and I help them with this, is you're not telling enough of your story.
Mm.
You're leaving too many things on the cutting room floor. You have to tell the story, because story is more important than information. And this is something I try to help a lot of people in the thought leadership space understand, that your story is what is the only thing about you that's proprietary. Your information is not proprietary. People can read your information, absorb it, understand it, and then they can go and say what you said as if they made it up. Right?
Mm.
It's not yours. You don't own that
Sure, yeah.
information. And nothing that we talk about as far as tactical wise, strategy wise, nothing any of us is saying is brand new. We may have a new way of saying it. We have a unique way of languaging it, but we didn't come up with the concept. I didn't create discipline or confidence or mental toughness. I didn't create basketball. I didn't create any of those things. But what I do have is a proprietary story. And the goal is figuring out how your story connects as a reason for why you care about these informational pieces. So the story of, as I said, my parents said, hey, they weren't trying to turn me into an athlete. They're not athletes themselves. They just want me to go to school, do my chores, do my homework, graduate. The discipline that I got from home applies to why I talk about discipline now. That story matters because that story makes it more proprietary. Okay, now it makes sense why Dre talks about discipline. So if I just came out of nowhere talking about discipline, it wouldn't make any sense. I had to give them a reason. Why do you talk about discipline? Oh, I talk about discipline because I started playing basketball when I was 14, and nobody taught me how to play. Nobody took me under their wing. I just went to the park every day by myself and just practice. Good thing about basketball is you can practice by yourself. And I just kept doing that, and eventually I got better and better and better. And then I played in college and I played pro ball. Now the story makes the information make sense because human beings, we need a reason. We need a reason for things. We don't do things just on information alone. Because if everybody did everything on information alone, then there'd be nobody overweight. There'd be nobody out of shape. There'd be nobody not having money. There'd be nobody with any type of defect, because we would just look at all the information that's free in the library or on Google or on Chat GPT, and we would all do everything we're supposed to do. But we don't do it because we don't have a reason. You got to give people a reason to do things. And most people think, if you ask most people what's in your way from achieving your goal, they usually tell you something that has to do with information, right? I don't know enough people. I don't have the information. I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. I don't have the strategy. I don't know how to do this, that, and the third. It's nonsense. That's not the reason. The reason is they haven't been given a good enough reason to apply the information that is easily available to them. So answering your question here, when it comes to story is everything. And there's an entrepreneur I'm working with right now. She is in the process of writing a book. And as we're working on her book, I just had a conversation with her we're recording this on a Monday. I had a conversation with her on Friday. Like, you're leaving way too much of your story out of your story. And the book is not about her story, but just in the intro, she's just explaining, because she had this little 2-paragraph intro explaining why she wrote the book that she wrote. And I said, you got to flesh this out, because that 2 paragraphs needs to be like 20 pages. And as I've continued to work with her, it's getting longer and longer, because I'm explaining to her, look, if we go through this first paragraph, just on Friday, we were doing this, and we're sharing screen on Zoom. And I'm going through the first paragraph, and I'm like, every one of these sentences could be like 2 whole pages of you explaining the point. She's saying something, but she's not explaining it. I'm like, you have to explain it. And people need to, because people need to know. They need to know why you're doing it, not what you're doing. They need to know why you're doing it. So, you familiar with Simon Sinek?
Yeah,
you heard of the speaker, right? And he has a book, I believe it's called "Start with Why," or a speech, or I think he has a book and a speech.
It's probably both.
Yeah. And the whole point is, the reason that people follow you or they connect with you is not because of what you do. It's because of why you do it. And that emotional connection is what causes human beings to connect with each other. The emotional thing that connects one person to another. And your information people can get to the bottom of your well of information. I have people in my audience to this day in 2024 who were following me from my basketball videos in 2009. Still following me to this day. It's not because of the information. Now, I believe my information is pretty good, Eric, but the reason that they're following me is because there's some kind of connection, like, of the way that I deliver, or why I deliver what I do, or something that I might have said in 2010 that they really connected with, that caused them to still connect with me to this day, even though the subject matter has completely changed.
Yeah.
And that's where, so to answer your question here, story is, it's the most important thing. If you're going to be in the intellectual property, thought leadership space, is the backstory of why you do what you do, not what you have to offer that makes a difference. And a lot of thought leaders get that backwards.
Yeah. I love that, man, because you're absolutely right. Like you said it earlier, there's no newness, right? And you could even talk about, when we think about story, people might think about fiction, they think about movies, but yeah, the hero's journey, the arc is kind of the same, right? You start, there's a challenge, the hero's, the denial of the call to action or the call to adventure, and then they kind of come back to it and they get the climax, right? That adversity, and then it kind of settles out, right? Like, the story is very similar, but we get drawn into these different characters, these different archetypes, because they resonate with us, right? Someone that shares something, you're like, man, I see myself in that, what this individual shared. And I think that there's such an expansion to what you're talking about, right? Absolutely, for people that are building something, right? Whether it's a company, whether it's a culture, but I'm fascinated with organizational culture, because I think that's going to be the make or break for my industry, policing and first responder work. But it's the ability to open up and connect with people, right? Oftentimes I say policing is the people business, but we don't think of it oftentimes like that. We think about the hard, kind of concrete things we have to do or not do. We don't think about the
Mhm.
connections. But in my career, where I've grown and I encourage others, is to recognize the opportunities for connection, right? Recognize your story. So to many of the listeners, they might not have the tangible carryover to, the entrepreneurial aspect that you're speaking to, but for their
Mhm.
own career and for efficacy in the team and trying to get everyone to gel, often sharing the why, right? And recognizing your own personal why. And we talk about it a lot with new cops coming in. It's like, hey, what is your purpose? What's your why? They say they want to
Mhm.
help people. And then you could even keep asking why? Like, why this way? Why in this job? There's a lot of ways to help people. Well, I
That's
want to
right.
work with kids. Cool. There's a lot of ways to work with kids. Why? And it's usually at the root of it. If you really work with someone or just have the conversation, something happened to them or someone they love. And it is this job, it is this uniform where they want to affect things in a specific way. And so I love what you're talking about. And I love that it seems like such a foundational piece to everything you're putting out.
Absolutely. Did you watch the TV show The Wire,
I
Eric?
did. Yeah. I
Okay,
love that
so
show.
yeah, and what you just said there, you said the policing is the people business, and it reminds me of that season in the movie when Jimmy McNulty stopped being a detective and he was a beat cop, right?
Yeah.
And the woman is a
Pissed,
black woman in
pissed
the
off the
neighborhood.
boss too many times, right?
Right, yeah, he pissed off the bosses, and then
Yeah.
he was on a boat, and then he decided to become a beat cop. But then he was happy as a beat cop
Yeah.
because he got to go home at 5. He got a 9 to 5. He got to go home at night instead of
Mm-hmm.
taking the job with him. And it was the woman in the neighborhood. She started to explain. I can't remember. I think McNulty was at the meeting because there was like a community meeting, and the woman got up on the mic and she was like, "It was this cop," and she remembered his name. She said every night he would walk the beat and he would sit on the steps with my grandmother and he would just talk to her. And that's what policing used to look like. You cops don't do that anymore. Y'all come around here just trying to beat up the drug dealers, and y'all are not building relationships with the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And Jimmy McNulty, they showed him doing exactly that. He would just walk his beat, he would sit down, and he would talk to the neighbors, and they all knew his name. He knew their names. And that was what the policing was supposed to look like when the neighborhood was under control. So when you said policing is about people, it made me think of that. And the other thing you said, just talking about telling the story, like the reason why you do the thing. I remember reading Tony Robbins' book. He had a book. He has got a bunch of books, but he had a book called Money Master the Game. I don't know if you read that or familiar with it. But I remember reading that book, and Tony is a very long-winded guy. Have you ever seen Tony speak in person?
Not in person. No, I've
Okay.
seen clips and I've listened to him, for hours on different shows, different podcasts.
Yeah, because he can't talk for less than 2 hours, right? So you
He's
get
a
Tony
great
on
speaker.
anything,
I
he's
mean,
gone.
he's one of the goats, right?
Yeah, he talks for a long time. So I've been at conferences where it wasn't even his conference, but he's a speaker. Tony Robbins doesn't have an end time, so he's always the last guy, and they
Sure.
always tell you don't buy a flight out tonight because Tony's the speaker. So
People
if you
stay,
try to get a
right?
flight, you're gonna miss it. Right, you're gonna miss the
Yeah.
flight. So he'll speak for 5 hours at somebody else's event.
Man.
And anyway, when I was reading his book, Money to Master the Game, the first 70 pages of the book is him just reiterating his entire philosophy around money and minds, not even money, but mindset and personal growth and self-development. Like the first 80 pages of the book are not even about money, but the book is supposed to be about money. He
Yeah.
doesn't get to the money part till like page 100. The whole point is he spends that first section of the book reintroducing himself, his concepts, as if you never heard of him before. That's not the way the book is written, the way it's designed. It's him helping you understand why personal growth and personal development, why it matters to him so much. And then he starts to segue into how this applies to money and life. And then he actually starts talking about the actual subject of the book. And I'm sharing all that to say, when it comes to your why, that matters so much. You have to explain that to people every single time. And Tony Robbins is a pretty famous guy. He's doing it in his books. All right. So what does everybody else think they need to do in their stuff?
I love
Yeah.
that. And a newer concept to me was, just a simple phrase that I heard, but basically pattern recognition and, tracking success or tracking failure, right? And so we learn as humans, as animals, like, hey, that guy over there did that and it didn't work out so well. Okay, this person over here did this and it worked out great. It's something we do a lot in our industry with tactics, right? With specific actions, specific police actions. But I love how you even outlined this example with Tony Robbins to say, hey, this is how you send home a message, right? One of the most influential speakers of our time, motivational speaker, right? Speaker to the masses, helped who knows how many people kind of turn their mindset around, turn their lives around. in the space, kind of a pioneer, and he still does not cheat the purpose, right? He doesn't cheat the introduction, because that's what resonates.
Mhm.
That's what drives the point home. And, I did make a note in everything that you're sharing. I think there's a huge crossover to organizational leadership. And that's something we talk about a lot here too, where we have a lot of different generations. And so many times, the quote unquote, the boomers are like, hey, just do it because I told you to. But these young kids, they want to know why. They need to know why. And I think that there's enough conversation about it now that the older generations recognize, hey, it's not a challenging, like, hey, tell me why or I'm not in. But it's like, hey, tell me why so I can better understand it, so I can really take it and run with it, to know that purpose. And I think that I still see it enough, in my region or in different conversations, that it is worth refocusing in on, because if you want to build team, whether that's at work or at home, you got to explain the why, right? And
Agreed that why is the biggest part. Just like we said, with every person out there who puts a message out, people need to understand subconsciously what's the reason why this person is sharing this message. People need that. That's the glue between the information and the emotion, the reason, the trigger for this. And when people understand that, now they'll better accept your message, your information. So you always have to reiterate every time you're putting yourself out there, what is the reason that you are talking about this subject? You have to give people the reason why it's coming from you. The information could be perfect, but if people don't understand, they don't connect you to the information, they're not going to hear the information.
with all the projects you're working on and what you continue to develop, what is your why as you continue to grow and expand?
We want to get the message of work on your game out there to the world. We want this to be the thing when it comes to personal and professional development. So if you hear "just do it," you know who that is and you know what it means, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you hear Xerox, you know who that is and what it means. You hear Kleenex, you know what it is and what it means.
Yeah.
So when you hear "work on your game," we want people to know what that is, and we want people to know what it means. And we want them to make that ubiquitous, when it comes to personal development and professional development.
Yeah, I love that, man. I want to ask a little bit about you, right? You're a fascinating individual. You've found this level of success in so many different lanes, and it just appears, from my just getting to know about you, it continues to grow and expand. Um, to take it way back, you have a little note on your site where you talk about you're a self-proclaimed nerd from a young age. So I'm curious, you know, I got a lot of respect for the nerds. What flavor of nerd were you as a kid?
Is that still on my website? I didn't even know. But
Yeah, now you know.
yeah. So what flavor of nerd was I? I used to wear these thick bifocal glasses before it was cool to be wearing glasses, and
Oh,
I was
okay.
always pretty tall. I'm 6'4", so I was growing pretty quickly. So my clothes would be too small for me. Back before that was cool. It's cool now to have too small clothes, and
Yeah,
it's cool to
fitted
wear
clothes or whatnot.
glasses.
Yeah,
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 it's cool to be a nerd now. So this is flipped around completely. So I was that when it was not cool. So that's who I was.
yeah. That's so funny. Were there certain things you're into that were like typically nerdy? For me, I loved like superhero stuff growing up, and now that's cool, right? And so you think about like the nerd flip. There's so many examples of that.
Right. Yeah. What was I into then? I mean, I was into sports, but I wasn't good at them. I know I was into it. I wasn't good at it. I mean, I was a fairly good student. Again, before it was cool to be a good student, because now that with tech and everything, to be smart is actually a great business opportunity. So I was a fairly good student. That flipped around when I stopped being a good student or stopped being great. Became average. And what else? What else was I into? I mean, I was into playing video games, but that was pretty acceptable
Sure.
even then. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
There was no business opportunity playing video games back then, but everybody liked to play them.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? What a
Yeah.
thing. When you have so much going on, you're traveling a lot, you're building business, you're writing books, where do you find balance? Because a lot of the crux of this show and the conversations we have is about health and wellness in a general sense.
I get up early in the morning and do I guess what they call self-care now. That's the first
Yeah,
part of my day. So
yeah,
I wake up about 3:30, 3:45 ish. And I don't start working until about 7:45, 8 o'clock. So that first 4 hours is all stuff that I get to do for myself. So go to the gym, work out, yoga, meditation, jacuzzi. Either I'm running outside, I'm going to the boxing gym, whatever. So the first 3, 4 hours of my day is that stuff. And then I spend the rest of the day doing this stuff.
very good. Yeah, I love that, and that's a huge reminder. We have we have busy days in first responder land, long shifts, but
Mm,
it is a continual beating of the drum. Like, hey, you got to pay yourself first. And if you don't
right.
take care of these things, mind, body, then you're not going to be operative, right? Yeah. When did you get into meditation yoga? Because that's an increasing awareness, I suppose, and something that I've been dabbling in more, finding different opportunities for mindfulness because a lot
Mm,
of us in this type of space are like go, 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 right? And so we're trying to
right.
multitask, triple task, but to actually
Right.
recognize the unplug. Where did you find success in that, and what helped you make that part of your normal routine?
Great question, Eric. So there are 5 areas that I recommend to all people when it comes to just taking care of yourself. There, if I can remember all 5. So it's sleep, physical flexibility, mental flexibility, water, and exercise. Those are the 5. So when it comes to the meditation and the yoga, so the meditation, I don't remember who initially put me on or what initially put me on to the meditation, but I heard that there was an app that you could meditate with. And I just heard someone explain the concept of you need to take time every day to clear your mind. Your mind needs to get cleared the same way that back in the days, it's not like this with computers these days.
Oh,
They
you had
can
to
run
like,
for,
yeah, defrag them or whatever.
yeah, right. You
Yeah,
had to kind of every once in a while close all the tabs and close all the windows and reset the computer or turn it off, turn it back on, right? Because it
hmm
would start getting slow. Your computer would freeze on you. Again, laptops, it doesn't happen these days with these Apple laptops. It doesn't happen. I've had this. I don't remember last time I
Shout
turned
out
this.
to Apple.
Yeah, exactly. They mastered this stuff. You don't even have to turn it off anymore. There used to be a time where things are all messing up. You had to reset it and let the computer refresh. And the same thing with your phone. It doesn't happen with the phones anymore either. That you had to turn the phone off, turn it back on because it was acting up. And they said your mind needs the same thing. You need to have some time when you're awake where you're not doing something, you're not listening to something, watching anything, reading anything, talking to anybody, and just let your mind get clear. And especially in these days, because now you can put the AirPods in your ear. You will literally be connected to something
Yeah,
24 hours a day,
yeah.
or at least not when you're sleeping, 16 hours a day. So the meditation, the concept just made sense to me. And I'm a person who I will pivot very quickly. If someone can explain something to me that makes sense, I will cold turkey start doing it.
Mm.
So when I heard about meditation, I heard there was an app on your phone. You can get the Calm app and you can just turn it on and meditate. And I started doing it immediately. And right now, actually, as a matter of fact, I was just looking at this on my app this morning. My current streak is 2,143 days
Look at
of
you.
using the meditation app. And I don't sit down quietly and burn incense because I would fall asleep if I did that.
Sure.
I use it while I'm doing my yoga in the morning. So about 20, 30 minutes every day. So that's the meditation piece. As far as the yoga, that came from when I was playing basketball. And how old are you, Eric? Your
38.
mommy. Okay, so as men get over the age of 30, it's
Mm-hmm.
important for all of us, especially if we use our bodies for any kind of work.
Yeah,
The body starts to stiffen up.
I feel
It
it.
is not as flexible as it used to be. So over the age of 30, it happens to all of us, regardless. Especially someone like myself, I was playing sports, so I'm playing basketball, and at the time, I was having back issues. My lower back kept getting tight on me for no reason, or no reason, at least according to what I thought. So I had a friend at the time. She had often gone to a chiropractor, so she recommended me to the chiropractor. I go to this chiropractor twice, paid this guy $100 both visits. And anybody ever been to a chiropractor, they just touch your back a few times and say, all right, you're good to go. Didn't do anything. I had nothing. $200 down the drain, nothing happened. All right. So I'm like, this is not working. I need something here. So I was watching a basketball game, as a matter of fact, and I heard a former player, he was a broadcaster for the game, and he was talking about how some players on one of these teams are now doing yoga on a regular basis. And he started talking up yoga. He said, I started to do yoga back, and he played like in the 70s. He was like, man, I started to do yoga back in the 70s, and that helped extend my career for about 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
And he said, now I don't
It's
go
huge.
to classes anymore, but I still do a practice on my own. I said, well, let me try yoga. I mean, if nothing else worked, let me try yoga. Because at the time, anybody's ever played basketball, you have to understand when your lower back hurts, you cannot play basketball.
You can't
Because
do
when your lower
anything.
back
Yeah,
hurts,
like
yeah,
cops, firefighters, they know that well, right? It's connected
right.
to
You can't even tie
everything.
your shoes.
Yeah.
Right. You can't tie your shoes. You can't do anything that requires you bending at the waist, even a little bit, because your back is hurting. You can't jump. Damn sure can't jump. You can't run. You can't do anything. You can't react to anything when your back hurts. You can't even put your socks on. Right. So my lower back had been hurting me. I couldn't go to the gym and work out because my back's bothering me. So I said, let me try this yoga. So I go on YouTube and I just look up yoga. And there are a million yoga videos on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And you look up yoga for anything, yoga for arms, yoga for lower back, yoga for prenatal, yoga for hot yoga, yoga for 30 minutes, yoga for 5 minutes, yoga for 17 minutes. You put yoga, body part, and a time frame, and there's 10,000 videos on YouTube that will give you this. So I just started looking up yoga for lower back, and there's a bunch of videos, and I just start doing it every day for about 15 minutes. I just start doing the yoga. And that was in 2000, and this is probably 2013, Eric. I have not had a single lower back issue since. It's been over 10 years, not one. I've never had an issue with my lower back in the last 10 plus years. I've been doing yoga every single day since then. And this is just yoga off YouTube. I never had a yoga instructor. I took a couple yoga classes. Yoga classes are a good place to go for a man, especially if you're single. And I'll leave it at that. But
yeah, everyone.
yoga,
Meanwhile, like I'll make the joke because every single dude is just throwing weight around, and the only people that get impressed are other single dudes, which is great camaraderie. But yeah.
Exactly. So if you're a man in the gym, go to the yoga classes. All right. And just take my word for that. Pilates as well. So anyway, so I started doing yoga by myself, and that cured up all my lower back issues. So I still, to this day, my yoga practice doesn't take long. It's about 5 minutes, my yoga routine. And then the fact that I work out a lot. So I also do foam rolling, for those who know what that is, and stretching. Yeah. So, and that doesn't take me more than, again, 5 to 10 minutes every single day. And I will not miss a day. Even if I'm traveling, I do not miss a day.
Yeah. That's the good thing is you can take it with you, right? And even the other things, rewinding back, you're like, hey, water, that's like just one of the main prongs. And that's something that anyone can add in right now. Talk about habit stacking, where you could literally make a stretching or yoga or foam roll routine daily when you're waiting for your coffee, right? Like before you're fully awake, you can do something and it'll jumpstart your day. But man, I love it. And you have me convinced, right? I've been on the tipping point. I've said a couple times, I had Kendall Ann yoga on the podcast recently, and then Vance Rowe, which will be airing around the time of your episode, yoga for first responders, where I've said, hey, I'm aging. I was lifting heavy. I loved it. Got into jiu-jitsu as an older age and loved it, but it's not serving my purpose right now. And so taking a break, but back in tune with everything you're saying. You told a story. And so the testament is there's a credibility. And now I'm like, okay, cool. Accountability piece. I'm going to log on to YouTube, do some yoga today. But yeah, man, I love that. And thank you. I want to be mindful of your time. I appreciate so much you coming on. If you could summarize for us, what the big thing that people can adopt. I know there's a lot of big things, but if you could circle back what you would encourage people to resonate on as they consider their own lives and kind of turning up that dial for professionalism and optimization.
Most important thing is keeping in mind that everybody has a game. We all have a game, whether you're a first responder, you're an athlete, you're an entrepreneur, you're a stay-at-home parent. We all have a game. And in your game is your job, first of all, to understand what game you're in. I find, especially working with entrepreneurs, Eric, that a lot of entrepreneurs think they're in one business, but they're actually in another. You got to know what business you're actually in.
Wow.
You got to get clear what game you're in. Then once you understand that, now you have to ask yourself, what do I need to do to fine tune my game to best play this game? Because again, we're in a performance and a results-based business. What matters is not what you desire to do or what you intend to do, but what you actually do. All right, because the results are what matter. I come from the sports world. We judge by the scoreboard, not by your words. So you got to go out there and perform. You work on your game so you can get a chance to perform. Then you perform, you produce results. If you produce the desired results, you get rewards. You get all the rewards that you want. And then what you do is just repeat the cycle. You got to keep watching the game because the game sometimes shifts. The game in 2010 is not the same as the game as it is today. So you got to watch the game to make sure you adjust as necessary. Keep working on your game, keep performing, keep producing results, and you keep getting the rewards that you want. We can all see that life continues to cost more to live, costs more to live, costs more to die, costs more to be born. So we got to keep performing so that we can keep getting the rewards we want. And one last thing I'll share is that I just had, and I'm sure you probably know about this being in the first responder space, just had a person who was a coaching client of mine, just found out 2 days ago, today's Monday, 2 days ago, she took her own life. Young woman, early 30s, doctor, successful by every measure, parent of a young child, a 6-year-old child. Man. Took her own life. She was successful financially. She was successful socially. She was successful professionally. LinkedIn level successful. Took her own life. And we don't know because she has stopped communicating with everybody, even me. And you don't know how much time you have. Now, most of us are not going to do it to ourselves, but even then, We don't know what life is going to throw at us. None of us know how much time we have left. So having a sense of urgency and being conscious and intentional about getting everything that we want to get out of ourselves while we are here before that time runs out, because we all know our time runs out. The challenge is we don't know when. So we need to live with urgency as if we don't have till tomorrow to put things off. So that's the biggest thing that's been on my mind as of right now when we're recording this.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for sharing that. And I think it is worth taking a moment because, yeah, you're right. We don't know how much time we have. And so we need to take ownership and be grateful and keep charging, right? And focus on what's important and what our purpose is. And even with that, right, talking about working on your game. I mean, there's so many aspects of health. And you said it earlier, right? There's physical, mental, emotional, all these intersections where we got to be tuning into that. And that is something we talk about a lot here is mental health and suicide awareness, suicide prevention. And,
Right.
It's for us and it's for our families and everyone we're with, like our people. So yeah, man, I do appreciate you sharing that and everything and being on the show today.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your space with me. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for sharing your platform.
Yeah, absolutely, Dre. If you could tell the listeners, and we will have your links in the show notes, but if you could tell them where they can find you, where they can get in contact and what you're working on now.
Sure. Well, I'll offer anybody a free copy of one of my latest books. Can I share that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
I'm gonna take you up on that.
All right, great. So I know this is not going to be on video, it's audio, but you can see Eric right above my shoulder, this book called The Third Day.
Oh yeah, that's a good cover.
Yes, it's The Third Day is called The Decision That Separates the Pros from the Amateurs. So it's kind of what we talked about at the very beginning here. And that book is all about how you show up and give your best effort when you least feel like it. For people in your line of work, first responders, I'm sure you have days, you may not announce it, but I'm sure you have days when you don't really feel like working, but you have a shift in front of you, right?
Absolutely.
And yeah, as athletes, sometimes we have practice or a game. We don't really feel like being at practice, but you have to show up to practice because that's the job. You're a parent. I'm a parent. And we're men, so we get it a little bit easier. But moms know, and you can ask them. There are days they don't feel like doing that work, but they have to do it, right? Because there's nobody else to pass it off to. And that's the third day. The third day is that situation when you realize, oh, I got to do this job. It's all expected of me. I can't pass off to anybody else. I don't really feel like doing it, but you have to do it anyway. So the third day is all about how you systematically and mentally set yourself up to do your best effort, again, when you don't feel like it. Book's free. Just cover the shipping. Just go to thirddaybook.com. That's all spelled out. Thirddaybook.com. And just cover the shipping. We'll ship that book to you where you are, paperback copy of the book. So that's the best place to go to get deeper into my world. As far as social media, I'm on every single platform. Somehow TikTok has been picking up for us. I don't know why. Yeah. I don't even log on to TikTok, but my assistant posts everything. But TikTok's been doing great for us. So I'm on every app. Probably most active on Instagram. My Instagram is just my name, @Dre Baldwin. And if you just follow me on any of those, you'll come deeper into our stuff. We got plenty of stuff, but follow me anywhere. You'll get to know about everything else that we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again so much. You've been a wealth of knowledge for myself and certainly for the listeners.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.